Good Monday morning, everybody. This is Grace, and today, what's on my mind, has been on my mind, is more of a collective narcissism as seen in generations. And that was the noise you heard was one of my dogs, as usual, my main distraction. And what's on my mind, I'll start with a story from when I was a kid. I was a young child, and I remember, I have a vague memory. I was that young that I just have a vague memory of basically, I was standing in front of my the refrigerator in my home, as a child, and I was hungry. And as I remember it, I was standing there, and I had the refrigerator door open, and my mom walked up, and I said, "I'm hungry. I'm really hungry." And she looked at me, and she said, "Oh, you're so much part of the me generation." Now, as a child, I thought, "Hey, me generation sounds kind of cute, But by her tone, no, I knew it was not a compliment, even though I didn't know what a compliment meant at that age. Anyway, so, I just looked at her and I said, "What do you mean by that? What does that mean?" And so she starts telling me what it means, how we're all about me and it's, gimme, 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 that kind of thing. And she went on and elaborated on it. And I stood there as this young child thinking, she's confused. That's her generation. Okay? Think about it. My generation is, I'm a younger baby boomer. Her generation was the silent generation. That's during the time of like Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis. I know Jerry Lee Lewis because she was a friend of his. And so think about what you probably have heard a lot in your life at some point, or at some point you realized it, that every generation, their children, they think that their children's generation, especially in like music, they're wrong. They're bad. They've gone too far. In my mom's, it was Elvis. Just think of how her parents and their generation thought of them as having Elvis. I'll be right back. Okay, before I drift too far. My mother was a member of the silent generation. I'm a younger baby boomer. She had 4 baby boomers and 1 Gen X. Okay, so the whole thing about the generation in itself, their generation felt that our generation, silent generation, felt that my generation, baby boomers, were all narcissistic. However, what does a narcissist do? Think about it. Isn't it that they tend to project their own faults on somebody else? Usually their next generation, their kids. So we think about that, and you think about how it's always said that my generation is the me generation, the millennials are the me generation. Where's the second me? Well, my theory, and I don't think I was wrong as a kid, is that my mother's generation was the original me generation, my generation, the me generation, and the millennials, the me generation. It tends to, as I've seen it, kind of skip at least part of a generation, like the older baby boomers maybe, and then the Gen X, and here it is, the millennials, and then there's the Gen Y, Z, and they don't seem as narcissistic as the millennials. So, anyway, there's projection working here. Isn't that a trait of a narcissist? And they're never wrong. They're never wrong. They never admit to being wrong. They never, they tend to. It depends on where they are on the whole continuum. But wouldn't somebody saying that your generation is the me generation, they're not admitting to their own fault, but projecting. So yeah, think about it. Okay, another sign of it to me that would indicate that my parents' generation was more of the me generation, was hearing something all of my life from them, and that was children should be seen and not heard. You see my dog, he doesn't apply it to himself. But anyway, children should be seen and not heard. What does this mean? Really, what does it mean? Is it all about obedience? Or is it about the attention should be placed on their generation? You see, on the parents. The children should be quiet. They can be seen, but not heard. What does that say? What does it sound like? Okay, think about it. And there's one other thing, is that just in my example with my own mother, then she was not I would say she was not a narcissist, but maybe borderline with narcissistic tendencies. Her lack of empathy. Her child was standing with the refrigerator door open. That would be me, saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And her mind was on, you're the me generation, you're all y'all want is gimme, 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 it's all about you. Lack of empathy. Okay. Was that represented, did that she represent in a way her own generation? Yes. I could see that myself as a child, like I said, young child. I'm like, she's confused. She's talking about her generation. So, and when you really think about, the whole narcissism comes from Narcissus. I want to say it wrong every time I try, but that's a Greek mythology. And Narcissus was one that saw his reflection in a pond or lake, or I've heard and read different stories, but basically saw his reflection, fell in love with it, and one of them said that he died out of starvation. Another was that that's all he did was stare at himself. Anyway, it's all about that person. Well, a collective narcissism is this all about our generation. We're all good, and the other ones are all bad. And you can see it in the way they project, all the things I've already said, the way they project, the way they lack the empathy, the way their generation is the best, yours is wrong, ours is right, over and over and over again. Okay, but where I was going with, this has been around a long time, so it wasn't really my mother's, generation either, because the thoughts about narcissism have been around for a very long time. Freud was one. I don't know if he was the first one, because there is this Greek myth, but he did a lot on narcissism also. And that back in the late, I think one of them was in the 1914 or somewhere around there. But it's not something new, but it's something that you can see. And I can't think of any generation that you can't see it in, where they have some kind of a collective view of people, collective narcissism in their own group. Anyway, my dogs are going to start making noises. Okay, and they did start making noises right after I kicked off, but more noises, I should say. But what I'm very interested, I would love to find out, is which generation came up with a criteria originally for narcissistic personality disorder. What was their bias? There's always a bias, an agenda. Was there one? How professional were they? To what extreme was it? And was it my mother's generation? Maybe her parents' generation. So, but every generation, we see the millennials, people in my generation, the baby boomers, see the millennials as very narcissistic. And is it based on our own criteria? Because being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder is very rare, but you have to meet the criteria to, like I was taught, to the extent of, to the degree of, along this line, the whole continuum, so-called spectrum, and how much it affects this and that and everything. But everyday people just looking at another person, listening to another person, what criteria are they basing it on? Now, there's a difference when people, with these days, even the terminology has changed these days, that they call them narcissistic, people who are narcissistic, as really, at one time, that would be, the people that they describe would be more of sociopaths or psychopaths, or then borderline personality, people with borderline personality disorder. It could be other ones, but people put it all under narcissistic. And these terms change. As we age, they change. As the world ages, these change. So anyway, these days, a lot of it, people just pile under, like I've said before in another video, under narcissistic. Now, I'm not talking about people who are to the extreme on the spectrum, on the whole continuum, to the extreme. But what we see these days, isn't it based more on what our generation thought, how our generation acts, behaves, thinks? So we see the next generation just as my parents did, just as her parents did, as wrong, as bad. Gotta think about that. Anyway, I'm having a little fun with this. You might not be able to tell, but it could be an example on how to draw the wrong conclusions, or maybe not. You be the judge. I'll talk to y'all later. Okay, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. It kind of came to me as I clicked off. Is that it does this? All this begs a question, because when you hear, there goes the dogs. When you hear that, say, a couple is going in for marriage counseling, a young couple, millennials, they're going in for marriage counseling. What they need, when there's some kind of narcissistic abuse or something working there, what we term it these days, and it's there. So they're going into counseling, which is, as you will hear, is very difficult to get one in for counseling. But what's said is that they need somebody who's the counselor needs to be very experienced in this. That's what's often suggested, So very experienced might mean that it's going to be someone from the baby boomer generation. Now, that question is begged is, can the counselor keep their own collective narcissism out of it? That's just my question. When they're dealing with clients, some call patients, but clients who are millennials. Yeah, it does beg a question, doesn't it? Anyway, make sure you read my description box below this video on YouTube. I'm not a healthcare professional. This is my disclaimer. I'm not a healthcare professional provider. This is just my opinions. Don't take it as any counseling advice or anything like that. It's just, this one, it's just my opinion. So now I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good day.